Here's another Dadages pop quiz for you. What's the difference between hard money and soft money? If you don't know, please go back and watch part 1 of the interview with Charlie Einsmann. Part 2 of that interview is on deck today. Check it out.
You know, when I was your age, go ask your mother. I know you don't like it. It builds character. How many times do I have to tell you? I'm not just talking to hear my own voice.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Dadages. I'm your host, Chad Hagle. And if you are looking for some fatherly wisdom for your career, your family, or any other aspect of your life, then you've come to the right place. If you want to learn more about Dadages, find additional content, submit questions, or feedback to me, visit dadages.com. Thanks for being here. And before you listen to our podcast, please listen to your father. Dadages friends and family, we're back, and we're continuing our discussion with Charlie Einsmann, fellow real estate entrepreneur and author of Real Estate Investing: Roadmap to Wealth. Today we pick up where we left off, following the roadmap, and we'll hear some wonderful insights and stories from Charlie, both business and professional. Let's get back to it. Well, let's stick with, as you said, 6th grade level of discussion. I want to cover a couple more sort of fundamental basics for people in the friends and family that may be in the group that is just getting started or has an interest in real estate. We've talked about the debt side. Now, can you tell us what is a capital stack and why that's important for a real estate investor to understand?
Okay, so look at a capital stack. So one of the things that we did on the roadmap was we're sticking in the real estate world. We're trying to teach people how to go from no knowledge and no education through the roadmap, teach them how to find the money, more importantly, how to find distressed assets, because that's what it's about. And then we're going to teach folks how to do what's called wholesaling or fix and flipping. Remember, when we started fix and flipping, there wasn't this thing called wholesaling. And so basically what wholesaling is where you put a property under contract and then you assign that contract for a contract assignment fee and you make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever it might be. Well, that $10,000 or $30,000 is called a capital stack, right? Same thing on the fix and flip. Once you fix and flip the property, all your expenses on the purchase and everything, you know, your holding expenses, your purchase expenses, how much you bought the property for, your renovation expenses, then you subtract it out from the price that you sold the house. Well, the difference of that is your profit. Remember, we talked about profit as an expense. And so then that profit becomes your capital stack. Well, there's other ways that folks can make a capital stack in real estate. Well, whether it's commissionable income or, you know, anything like along those lines, you can buy land at an option, sell the option to somebody else at a profit, create that capital as well. So then once you have these different tranches of your capital stack in hand, then what we do is we teach you how to take that capital stack and invest it into passive income kinds of things. Whether it's tax lien certificate investing, whether it's investing in a pooled mortgage fund, whether it's being your own hard money lender. I teach gap funders this all the time. I show them how to become their own hard money lender, because the problem with gap funders is they only have maybe $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 sitting around. But there's no reason why, if they evaluate a deal, they can be that second trust position and generate a 13, 14, 15% return. So we teach them how to do that. We teach them how to invest in a pooled mortgage fund and get a return off of that. Maybe to build up a residential rental portfolio, it's going to need a little bit more capital stacked than 50 grand. And then maybe figure out how to invest in commercial real estate. So we try and show them how to take that capital stack, start generating your monthly interest or your monthly dividends or your monthly whatever you're generating off the properties. Compare that to your investing footprint, like your normal housing footprint. And so then what you want to do is take your passive income streams and hopefully start to decrease your monthly expense footprint from a passive income standpoint, if that made sense. That was a lot.
Yeah, no, and to use your word, it's a great roadmap. And a roadmap has a lot of waypoints along the way. So you can't draw a map with just one line. And it was great to kind of hear that narrative and how all the pieces fit together. So we've been talking a lot about money. Money is not everything in real estate. And as you said, the money will come. There's a way to get money if you're putting yourself in the right position. And I've seen that point to be very true in my business in the commercial sector as well. You wrote in the book, you can access capital when you have a deal with a strong equity position, even if you are starting with little cash. You have to have the deal to get the money in real estate, right?
That's a great question. And so one of the things that we show folks is this thing called liquidity, because it's all about liquidity. And so one of the things, I'll say something that's going on in the news,
Yeah.
is one of our friends needs to come up with a lot of liquidity
Yeah.
to pay back certain things.
What is it,
And
$85
so,
million plus $387 million or something like that?
yeah, we're kind of dating ourselves. And
Yeah.
so, and so one of the things that we show investors is that we teach them how to get their liquidity up. And so I use the example of the $300,000 in gold cards when I didn't have much cash. I might have had
Yeah.
$10,000 or $12,000 in cash. But since I had $300,000 in these cash advance gold cards, plus the $12,000, I now had $312,000 of liquidity. Liquidity being the definition of how much cash can I get my hands on in a 2 or 3 day period of time?
In
And
that
so,
moment when you meet that
yeah,
school teacher
mhm,
that is ready to sell
that's
the
right.
house to you on a Saturday.
That's exactly right. When they're ready to do it. And can I close that deal in a week or less? And so that's very important. And so a lot of things that we teach, especially in beginner investors, is that we understand you don't have much money. It's okay. But here are the various categories that you can start now to work on your liquidity. Keep track of it monthly. If you don't have time monthly, do it quarterly. Do it annually. Do it every 6 months. As long as you have the right habit of maintaining your liquidity and you have the right processes down, you're in good shape. We calculate our liquidity once a day in Clear Sky Financial.
Wow.
So my hard money business, we have so much money coming in and out every day. We have to calculate our liquidity because I have to know which loans I'm going to fund tomorrow, the next day, a week from now. So we keep track of that every day. Personally, I might keep track of it once a year now. I don't really keep track of it that often because most of my money is invested in all my other companies. And so
Right.
I kind of know what I can get access to, but I don't do much personally anymore. Everything we do is through our companies. And so I don't keep my own personal liquidity much. I'll do it maybe once a year.
Yeah, follow the money, follow the cash. It's certainly an important point. And, even operating on a commercial scale, we really make most of our investment decisions based upon cash flow, not based upon some structured accounting model. We look at the cash in and the cash out every single day, every week, every month, and make our decisions on that basis. So it works at every level, following the money, as you said.
That's funny because I tell my kids that all the time, whether they're talking about the health industry or whether they're talking about the engineering industry, even the real estate. I'm like, guys, you've got to understand the flow of money. I don't care what company you're talking about, what business line you're in. It's about the flow of money. Just follow the flow of money and understand it because that's what it's all about. And that's what should help you get into figuring out what you might want to do or not do.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, by the way, because I want to talk about challenging times. What happens when the money stops flowing? And how do you manage and maintain a business like yours, or for people who aren't as established as you and are just getting started? One of the things I always look at is the stress tests. I mean, you talked about 2008, and 2008 broke every stress test that was out there. How does somebody who's trying to, from the ground up, eke their way out and build a real estate business that you're talking about, ensure that business is recession proof? Because the recessions are going to come and there are going to be times when the money is not flowing at all.
Well, the one thing that we have in common is that the money stopped flowing for me. And so back when I was young and fresh out of college, I was working engineering jobs, but I started video stores. I owned a few video stores, like the Blockbusters.
Yeah.
And so we went through a tough time where we had a location in Bethesda, Maryland, and we had it down. We knew no one else was moving in because there was too many big buildings. And so we opened up a video store. And then what happened about 4 or 5 months later, a local liquor store went out of business and a Blockbuster moved in and became big competition for us. And we were paying $15,000, $20,000 a month in rent. Plus I had a payroll, plus I had videos. And so that business actually went belly up. And so that and I got a SBA loan, a big SBA loan that sort of we had to, default on. And so those businesses actually had to file a bankruptcy. And so I know what it's like when the money stops flowing.
Well, and now Blockbuster knows what it's like as well, right?
Right.
Something
right.
came along
This
called
was
Netflix.
Yep. Yep. And we sort of knew that was going to happen at the time.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we did in our real estate business was that when COVID happened, we went to what's called a net zero program. We were like, okay, what happens if the rents start coming in zero? So every rent was zero in our residential rental portfolio, and that was a lot of houses. Let's say all of our borrowers stop paying us That went to zero. What does our business look like receiving zero on the income side? And how long could we survive? So we actually had to undergo that. Actually, we underwent that exercise when COVID just started happening in March 2020. And that was pretty much by Ed, the lawyer, who told us to do that.
It's a very lawyerly thing to do.
Fancy a lawyer being conservative, right?
Yeah.
And so we actually went through that exercise. And luckily for us, we could have stayed afloat for at least a year, year and a half because of our existing liquidity, because of our existing credit lines. And so we were okay. But we did go through that exercise during COVID. And that's exactly what these real estate investors need to do, is go through similar exercises, right? But more importantly, they've got to build up their liquidity.
Yeah.
Because you never know when the money might stop flowing, and you're going to have to call up some of your creditors, not your friends and family, but some actual creditors, and tap some lines that you haven't tapped in the past.
Yeah, to weather that storm. And one of the things you were sharing about 2008, and I've seen it prove itself over and over again, is it's tough sometimes to be the best borrower at a bank because they know you can repay them and they're going to come after you. They forget about the people that are the losers that they're never going to get anything back from. And so you've got to count on the fact that even if you've got a good business model, a good plan, a good piece of real estate, the bank may come to you one day knocking, as you said, and they may call that loan, and you may have to pay it down based upon new underwriting criteria. And that's just part of life and part of life in the real estate world, and something that people just have to be prepared for and not feel like they're being singled out or that something's being done to them unfairly. It's the nature of the business.
Well, they're doing it to this day. Basically, the big banks, if you've got a home equity line of credit, they're getting out of that space. Some of the banks are getting in that. They don't want second trusts on houses right now. So they're changing their credit boxes as we speak. And it's funny you say that. One of the quotes I always tell people is a quote from Bob Hope. A bank will give you money provided you can prove you don't need it.
Exactly. The best time to borrow money is when you don't need it. I think that's in the banker's handbook. I think that's page number 1 is the Bob Hope page. Well, and speaking of having no money, one of the things my father has told me, and it comes back to the same topic, is always run your business like you have no money, even when you do. And I think one of the things that I experienced growing up is my father was building his business from scratch. And you shared with me leading up to the interview that you experienced as well, is tough times and learning how to navigate tough times for real. It's not just an imaginary stress test. It's real life and what you've been through and how you've come up. You shared with me that you had 5 brothers and sisters and that your dad was somehow making ends meet on $50,000 a year. Tell me about that experience. Tell me about how your father made ends meet, and tell me about what impact that had on you growing up and what you carried with that still today that impacts the way you run your business.
Another quote, right? The only one that cares about the money is the person that makes it, right? And so growing up in that household, I tell you though, we didn't want much. We had great friends. We were outside all day playing ball. As a matter of fact, here's another funny story. We had a 7-Eleven that was about, I don't know, maybe half a mile away that we used to walk to. We used to play the video games. And at the time it was a quarter.
Galaga
right?
was mine.
Right. Galaga. It was Galaga, Atari, right? It was Space Invaders. It was, what was it? Tron, and there was something else.
Yeah.
There was another classic game.
Centipede.
I'm not kidding. Yeah. Centipede. Yep. Remember? Yeah. So one of the things that we did, I'm not kidding you, we would sit out in the front of the house and we would bang nickels with a hammer until it became the size of a quarter. So we did a couple of these, right? We had about 3 or 4. Now
that's innovation. That's
and
a
then,
great one.
And then we went to the 7-Eleven, put the quarters in the video machine, and we played.
Wow, the 5-cent video game. I've never heard that. That's what I'm going to take with me.
Yeah, but here's how dumb we were. It took us about an hour and a sore forearm to get 1 nickel into a quarter. So go figure, right? And so that's one of the things that I learned growing up, is that we didn't have much as far as money was concerned. And so, my parents were always talking about finances and how tough it was to meet. And, when I was in college, they didn't really have much money to send me to go to school. And so luckily for me, I got a full tuition academic scholarship to a college in Kansas City. And so one of the things I realized growing up and not having much money is the thing that you realize is that you understand the value of a dollar and you understand how far it can go. And then you also learn to live your life by not wanting much materially. So what that does is you live below your means. And even when you come across a lot of money, and my partner tells me this to this day, he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I always tell him, I'm like, Sam, I don't care that I have this much money. The wolf is always chasing me. I'm always trying to, run away from the wolf. Now it's not that big of a deal anymore, but that's just the way we grew up. And you know what? I never wanted for much. And really, the money is only a means to lead me to help others. My kids, I don't know if I'm going to leave them much money. I probably obviously will, but for me, it's paying it forward. I want my Clear Sky Sports Angels Foundation. I want that to grow. I want it to be perpetual. I want that to be around when I'm gone. These are the kind of things that I want money. I don't want anybody. I don't want to have a boss. I don't want anybody dictating to me what I need to do every day. That's why I make the money. It has nothing to do with the assets in the world, the cars, the houses, this. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, and we'll come back to some of the things you're doing now, but I do want to, you mentioned earlier in the interview, your mom sending you real estate books. Tell us about that. And where did that come from? And obviously that gave you some ideas for the future and what you're doing now. Tell us about your mom and the role she played in giving you that perspective.
So she's in Virginia. I'm in Kansas City. I'm going to school in Kansas City, and she being all moms, what they do, they send you care packages, right? So my mom would send me care packages. I'm 1,100 miles away, and she sends me these care packages, some food or whatever junk. And then she throws in some books. The first book that she threw in there was called Gold Mining in Foreclosures. It was a good real estate book talking about, at the time, how to find foreclosures. And then she also sent another book it was a Robert Allen book, where he took people in a line in St. Louis, a homeless line. He took a few people out of there and taught them how to buy houses with no money down. And so at that point in time, he would teach them how to buy VA assumable loans, because you could assume a VA loan and an FHA loan with no money down. And so he just went through the whole story, but he actually did it with live people. It wasn't some made up stuff. And so that sort of stuck. So that got me interested in real estate from a learning standpoint, not really at the point an investing standpoint, because I'm in Kansas City. I'm going through college. I don't know that I'm going to stay there much longer, which I didn't. So I really didn't put any of that knowledge to use. Then what happened is I came back home.
Put it in the bank for later.
Right. Saving the bank for later.
Yeah.
And then, the funny question is I really don't know why she sent me that book, the books. And the reason is like you had your dad as what I look at as like a role model in the business world, right? He had started his business. You were younger, you were impressionable, you understood what he was doing. Well, that wasn't the same story for me. My dad had other good attributes, right? And it wasn't in the business world. He was always too scared and nervous, about the business world. He has an MBA from St. John's, but he also has a CPA. And if you know anything about CPAs, accountants and lawyers are the same thing. These guys are too conservative to make any money.
No risk tolerance whatsoever.
No risk at all.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the only risk he made was he bought a house in a place called Dale City, Virginia for $20,000 back in 1974. And that to him was a big risk. And he did that.
Not exactly wheeling and dealing.
Right. But again, my dad had different attributes that I got from him, trustworthy, giving it all to his kids, even though that all wasn't a lot. It was enough, just being a role model on a different side of things, maybe not financially, but some of the financial things that he went through sort of taught me. It taught me the value of a dollar. It taught me how to skimp. My mom was always coming up with different ideas. She would buy that orange juice. Let's say, do you remember the frozen orange juice in those cylinders?
The Minute Maid can, yeah.
Right, the Minute Maid can. She would make us orange juice, but let's say it made 1 quart. She would stretch that into a gallon.
Yeah.
She might add a little bit extra sugar,
orange
right?
Flavored water.
Yeah. She was doing all these crazy things, right? Just to save money. At the time growing up, we didn't really realize that we just got used to life. And that's how life was based upon my mom. And so, I will ask her why she sent me those real estate books. I really have no idea why.
When you do, please do me a favor, share the answer, because I'm equally curious now. And, one thing I'll say, though, is you said your dad wasn't really there as a financial role model for you, but I really think he was in a way, because he really taught you your discipline. And it sounds to me, if I, look at the fabric, the thread that's woven through the fabric of everything you've done in your business career, I see a lot of discipline. And my father taught me that real estate is not a money-making business. It is a risk management business. And it seems like you've done that masterfully.
Oh, that's true. That is so true. And I tell people this all the time. Real estate is a risk management business. And as long as you can manage that risk, people think it's easy. It's certainly not. But when you make it seem easy, then, that's a good thing. And so you're absolutely right. My father did teach me a lot of those things, and even discipline. Discipline is different. Discipline is waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting on that 95 highway, going to DC, taking an hour and 15 minutes to get to work, and my mom would have dinner ready. That's discipline that he did. And so it definitely had its impact on me. Watching him manage money had an impact on me. Watching him fuss about him filing taxes and really worried about these different IRS codes, that had a long lasting effect. And
yeah, in my family, the same way you're talking about. My dad raised me to be allergic to profit because profit gets eaten up by the IRS. And he said that he spends half of his time making money and the other half making sure the government doesn't take it away. And so that's another form of discipline, is looking at every real estate decision and every investment on a post-tax basis, because that's what really matters at the end of the day in terms of what goes into your pocket.
Yeah, no, that totally matters. And so even to this day, and you're going to laugh your head off. Well, so my dad's 84. And so my dad is always because he's a CPA, he still does his own taxes. And he's always getting up in arms about taxes and getting audited and getting this and getting that. And so every single year we have this discussion. I'm like, Dad, don't take this personally. The IRS doesn't care about you. You are so honest and you've done everything so above board. And really the taxes that you're paying into the system isn't really that much. You're not self-employed. You're not filing an extension. You don't make a lot of money. Dad, they really don't care about you. And so he just gives me that mean glare. Like, what are you talking about? Of course they care about me. And it's great.
He's the only man on the planet that wants to be audited. He just wants someone to care.
That's right.
That's funny. Well, and going back to your mom as well, even though she really planted this seed of real estate, residential real estate in your mind that, banked away for later on in life, you told me earlier, today you can't explain to her what you're doing. How do you, respect and credit your mom for, helping plant that seed for you and not overwhelm her with the enormity of what your business consists of today?
It's funny because my mom was always the person that would say, well, if you make all this money, then you got to pay all these taxes. And so my parents were very, very conservative. They grew up in Brooklyn, the Bronx, back in the days, and their parents were immigrants, right? So they're second generation. And so they lived tight financial lives as well. And so my mom just couldn't grasp all the things that we do. And she'd always say, when you're making all this money, you got to pay all these taxes. Well, it took my mom the longest time, especially to invest with us in the hard money business. And so we've had this private lending business for 10 and a half years. And finally, the last 4 or 5 years, she finally came on as an investor, both from a self-directed IRA standpoint and a cash account that, oh, by the way, she inherited. So technically it's probably not, it wasn't her cash to begin with. So now that she's invested in this business on the hard money side, she doesn't exactly grasp what we're doing, because my dad is always like, well, that business it's very risky and this and that. I'm like, no, Dad. I said, Dad, it's not really that risky. I said, take the $500,000 house. It's worth $500,000. I have a first trust on there at $350,000. I said, and that house is in a fully renovated state. I said, I have $150,000 to play with. Not only market correction 150, selling it 150. I said, this is a very safe investment. And you guys are getting a really, really good rate of return on your money every single month. And so we have that discussion all the time. But, so I keep it at that level with my mom and dad. I don't really talk about the rental portfolio. I don't talk about commercial portfolio. I don't talk about the fix and flip. I don't talk about the tax lien certificate investing. I just keep it at one topic and just keep it simple, so that they can understand and realize. And they always tell me this all the time. The money that they have invested with us is kind of our money anyway, right? Because they don't need it and they're just going to give it to us. And they've already told me that. And I keep telling them, I said, Mom and Dad, I said, please, I said, use all your money for your enjoyment. Don't give us kids one dime. I said, you raised a bunch of good kids. We don't need or want your money. You guys deserve to live a good end of your life. And so we'll see what happens, but they're going to end up.
That's a fantastic story. Yeah. And you're obviously, doing well by them. And it took a lot of convincing, it sounds like, but having them come along for the ride and benefit from some of the success that you're able to create. In terms of keeping it in the family, leading up to the interview, you shared with me as well that you're now paying it forward to the next generation too, and creating opportunities for your sons, Curtis and Corey. Can you talk a little bit about the roles that they've taken on in life and how their professional development has come along and how it relates to what you're doing?
Yeah, so I've got two boys, 30. Corey just turned 30 this year. Curtis is 31. So I don't know how far apart your boys are. My boys were 16 months apart. And so I tell people, I think I would have rather had twins, because when you have twins, at least they have the same needs going all the way up through the chain. When you're dealing with a 6-month-year-old and almost a 2-year-old, they have totally different needs, and it's a little bit more hectic. But that was a great part of life by raising them. And so the way they're taking part in our business today is that because we wrote the book, we're going to launch our Clear Sky education platform, and we're going to give back to beginning real estate investors and even investors that are not beginners. They can fit in anywhere in the roadmap. And so what Curtis has done is he got an engineering degree from a university called Virginia Tech, which is a really good engineering school. Worked for Amazon for 6 or 7 years. He got these things called restricted stock units. He got Amazon was about $400 a share, jumped up to 3,000, did a 20-for-1 split. So he has a pretty good nest egg just from his technology life, which I'm pretty happy about. But however, he doesn't own any real estate, which drives me crazy. And so then what happened was he moved to Las Vegas and he left Amazon, went out on his own to do other entrepreneurial things outside of real estate. And that makes me really happy and proud because he's sort of finding his own way. And so he doesn't have us as maybe I'm on the back burner, but what he's done is he built the front end for our education, and we're going to put out 11 courses. And by us putting out these courses, what I call it is he's working on the technology side. This is called forced learning. So by taking all of our courses that we're about ready to put out, he's learning not only what we're doing business-wise, but how to teach it. So he's learning it. So I'm very hopeful that Curtis will take over one day and learn about it so that we don't have to go through some sort of, create $100 million fund wrapper, a real estate fund to other investors and let, 2 young fund managers run it that are not related to me. I mean, that's the other thought that we might do. And so I'm pretty happy with Curtis. My other son, Corey, University of Virginia. So they were rivals. They were kind of rivals growing up. They both were in sports, travel soccer, travel basketball, high school basketball as well, and soccer. And so what he did is he went to UVA. And so one of the roles that Corey is playing, I've got a good story about Corey here in a second, but one of the roles that Corey is playing now is he wants to be a wholesaler and a fix and flipper. He's done a few wholesale deals. He's done a few fix and flip deals, but he wants to approach the business on his own end and try and make his own money and start his own thing. And so a story I have for you about Corey is that Corey also had a little bit of an interest, and I do say a little bit, in participating in the hard money space. Follow me around and go into these RIAs, real estate investment associations, real estate investor groups, subject to meetups, that kind of thing. And so I was going to turn my part of the marketing over to him on the hard money side. So he spent about, 7 or 8 months or maybe 6 months going to these real estate meetups instead of me. And these meetups are mostly at night. And so he did a couple of loans, but he was like, Dad, he comes back to me and he goes, Dad, I'm really working hard and I'm really meeting a lot of people. But he goes, everybody that I meet, they don't want to do business with Clear Sky Financial. They want to do business with you. And so one of the things that we went through was that he had a little bit of pressure, right? That he couldn't be me and that he wasn't me. And so that kind of went in the wrong direction. And so now he's participating in the business in a different viewpoint, and that's fine too. But part of being successful and being a dad, especially when your kids were older when you were successful, as opposed to you being successful when they were, in other words, you built your money as they were growing up. And then when they grew up and they sort of realized what you did, you were already there. That doesn't go 100% well all the time.
They only see the output. They don't see the input that it takes to get there.
I'm telling it backfires. And so with my younger son, we've had a very up and down relationship because of the fact that he understands he's smart, UVA, he's smart, and he also knows what we have out there. And so sort of what he expects is he expects some handouts, and it's taken a little bit of time to get him involved and teach him the work ethic and understand the relentlessness and all this stuff. So it's not always rosy in my world as far as both my boys, especially Corey. And we've actually gone through a little bit of, up and downs because of having money and because of wanting handouts. And it's just not my core. And he knows this because I raised him, and he's a really good kid. But it's not easy being a dad to two 30-somethings when you've already have achieved and aspired to what they want to come and be. For me, it was easier because my dad wasn't like that. So everything that I did, and I never really had that kind of investor role model. I had to learn and grow into it and get other role models as I was doing my investment career. And so all of a sudden I'm there. They didn't see all that stuff that it took to get there. And that's kind of,
So many things to delve into there. You know, in a way, the story you're telling is the classic older, younger story, right? The older sibling is the one that goes off on their own, spreads their wings, does their own thing. And if they come back, they've learned on their own how to be self-sufficient, and then they can bring that self-sufficiency into any endeavor, whether it's with the family, inside the family, or outside the family. And then the younger child, the baby of the family that's coming up and doesn't have that same sense of independence, self-reliance, etc., they are more accustomed to having their needs met, being nurtured. And that does carry over into later in life and into the business and financial context as well. And I have been through this myself with my two boys, the older younger phenomenon. My older son is the classic overachiever. He's cut from the same cloth that I am. You know, he works even harder than I do. Everything he does in life. My younger son is above average at everything. And he's always above average at everything. And he always exceeds the minimum. He exceeds the average, but he's got potential to do a lot more. And there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to push that right button to make him live that greater potential that I see in him. It's just simply not going to happen. And I don't know. And if someone out there could ever tell me a way to break that pattern, I would love to see it and I would love to learn it, but I don't know that it's escapable.
it's hard. And let me tell you something. You and me are similar from this conversation. Here's what you have to do. You have to reset your expectations for your son, because your expectations for your son can't be yours. He has his own expectations. And one of the things that remember that you did for your kids is that you have raised them to become independent thinkers. An independent thinker doesn't mean he thinks the way you think. He thinks the way he thinks. And I tell people this all the time. As a parent, you never get a day off. Never. It doesn't matter that your kids are 21, they're out of the house, they're in college, and they're on their own. You're always going to worry about your kids. You're always going to think about your kids. You never get a day off. I've learned to realize that. And so I had to literally reset my expectations for both my boys. And that's actually have helped. And so a lot of times for me, my son, I would get put on what's called the DNC list. Hopefully you won't get put on that list. I don't know if you know what that means. DNC means do not call. I've been on the DNC list for periods of weeks at a time, months at a time, not really a year. And I'll tell you why I've never been on the DNC for a year. Because every single year I take my kids on a vacation to the Outer Banks, a beach trip. We have been doing this trip for 25 years. And so I know that no matter what's going on between me and my sons, I'm going to see them for an entire week every single year. And no matter what's going on in our relationship, they're going to be there.
You've always got that reset point. Yeah.
I've got that reset point built in. They don't realize it, but it's built in. And so I had to reset my expectations with one of my sons. And that's actually helped me out a lot. And so I pull back from him. He comes to me when he needs stuff. I'm always there. It's a different relationship. It's a guidance as opposed to teaching. You teach as much as you can, but really now you're a guider. You're guiding him. You're trying the best you can. But remember, whatever you tell him, it might not work, or he might not hear what you're saying and he might not do what you say to do. But if you just stay consistent like I've been, then, I have a positive mentality. Things are going to work out just fine. And so that's the way I lead that life.
For sure. For sure. I mean, very, very wise words. And I love the reset point. It's such a great concept. And I think it's actually something that I'm going to sit down after this interview and think about and take some time myself to figure out how I can build a reset point in my relationship with my boys as well, because we're going to need it, right? Every dad out there is going to need that moment when things run off the tracks in the relationship with your children and you need a way to bring it back. And that's such a great idea.
They're going to run off the tracks because think about it, right? We're males. We're built with certain things in our mindsets. We're hunters and gatherers. We're hunters, right? We want to be our own man. We don't want to follow anybody. And so your sons are the same exact way. And so they're going to make mistakes too. But as long as once they make a mistake, you keep that communication channel open. That's what it's all about. It's all about the communication. And so one of the things my wife always told me is that, and she's not the mother of my kids, and she's always like, you guys need to do something together that's outside of anything else in business. And so I got my older son scuba certified. And so that's one of the things I'm going to do with my younger son when he's ready is get him scuba certified. So we at least have a common interest, because one of the things that I did with my dad growing up is his common interest was always golf. And so we went and played golf, quite a bit. And that's how we sort of had our good discussions. But my kids were never interested in golf. They were always busy doing things. So the one thing that we need to do as dads is get that common interest with our sons, because like I said, the number one relationship that we have in life is with our families, up, down, out.
And, in a way, it comes back to our whole discussion because, everyone talks about work-life balance. And I always talk about how I've thrown that notion out because it implies that those two things are two different things, and they're not. It's just life. We're talking about a business topic today, which is it takes credit to make money. There's a different kind of credit that exists in families. And you're talking about the investment that you're making in building a framework with your family and with your boys in particular. It's a totally different type of credit and a totally different capital stack that you're building at home, which I really respect. And it's based on your mindset, right? It's based upon the mindset that you've developed in your professional life and developed throughout your life, and applying that in a family setting as well.
Yeah. No, it's just like anything else. And as weird as this might sound, you basically set goals. You set relationship goals and you try and get there. But sometimes it does take two to tango, but you do have to set goals. And I remember one of the things that I always told folks is that presence beats presence. So you being present for them, no matter what your relationship is like, stay consistent, be present. It outweighs any kind of presence that your dad could buy for you. And, I take that to heart. And that's one of the things that I do in my life. And for me, it's funny because my younger son wants a different kind of, he wants me to feel a different way about him, and he wants me to see him in a different light. But because I've reset my expectations for him, and of course I will never tell him that, all I want in life for him to be a good person, check that box. He's wonderful. I want him to be the best father he's ever going to be to my grandson. Check that box. He's a good dad. And the money stuff, the career stuff, all this stuff that he's trying to do, whether it's in selling this Kangen water, well, it's selling supplements, or whether it's network marketing, or whether it is that he's doing, I care, but I don't. In other words, I don't need him to achieve those kinds of things. I've got different expectations that I've had to reset for him. And so it's made my life a lot easier, because by me resetting those expectations, I don't beat myself up over it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. And you mentioned earlier sort of succession planning, legacy, things like that. And that's where all of these family relationships then come back into the business realm, right? Is when you're looking at the future and what comes after me, and I'm building something that will in fact be a legacy. And is it something that I can hand down, or is it something that I have to hand over to someone who's outside the family? You talked a little bit about that. I'll share just a little bit about my family background when it comes to legacy. And then I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts further on the topic. There was a point in time about 6 years ago that I actually sat down and wrote a life plan for myself for the next 15 years of my life. And I put a lot of time and effort and thought into it over the course of about a year. And I think it ended up being about a 70-page document when I was done. One of the sections of that life plan was wanting to figure out, because I had developed this skill set in the same industry as my father, but had never been a part of his business or his company, was there a way that I could be the pathway to creating a succession plan for his company? And I spent a good part of the last 3 or 4 years investing in trying to make that happen. I had a very strategic plan as to how to work through that and get engaged on some things we're working on together, and see if there was a way to build a plan. And I am very happy to say that I've arrived at a very clear answer. I'm very sad to say that the answer is no. I can't. There's nothing I can do to be a part of that. And ultimately, my father's business is based only on him as an individual. I like to say sometimes that the people in his company won't fart without asking him. And it's almost a true statement. And it's really unfortunate. But when he reaches the point that he is done working in his company will cease to exist and there will be no succession plan. And nothing has been established to take the going concern, take the goodwill, take the value, take the platform that has been built and be able to transition that so that it has longevity and it has a legacy attached to it. He's going to do a lot of great things. He has already done a lot of great things, and he will support massive charitable endowments and provide gifts that will create a legacy in a different way. But I feel like it could be so much more, and it's not going to be. And so to me, it's one of the things in building my own business that I want to avoid is ending up where he ended up. So I'm always looking for ways to create longevity, create the next tier of management, and create a vehicle that can live on beyond me. When you hear all of that story, relate that to what you're looking at and what you're staring down right now and how you're approaching these same decisions for yourself.
Hearing that story is number one. I never created this to be me intentionally. Everything I've done as far as my sons are concerned is unintentional. But that's exactly what has happened with our businesses, right? Because all of our assets, everything that we do, even though I have partners, it all really revolves around me because I'm the tip of the sword. But that was from an unintentional standpoint. So thinking about what you just said.
It's the curse of great capability, right?
That's exactly right. And I feel bad for my younger son because I feel that over a period of time, and I understand this, is I feel that I have cursed him unintentionally because he sees this. And so my next plan, and I've got my next plan getting ready to get started, is that I want my Clear Sky Sports Angels Foundation to grow so big that guess who I am going to want to run that organization? My younger son, because he loves sports. He would be good at this. He's a good people person. And so not only will the foundation, it will generate interest, right? The interest will run the foundation. I've got to get to a certain size. And so that will run the operating budget of the foundation. We're not to a point of time where I can hire an executive director of that. But I want that to be my son to run that foundation because he is a charitable person and he would give back. But that will help him financially. It'll help him. I think it'll help him. And so that's my short-term plan. Yeah. Stay tuned. We'll see.
Yeah. So, I'd love to follow that, and I'd love to keep tabs on it and see how that goes for you. And such wisdom on your part to, not try to force your sons to fit what it is you're doing, but to take the platform of what you're doing and then find those components that your sons have grown into and matching them where they are. That's fantastic and amazing to hear. As a son of a father, it's what I wanted my father to do for me. And I'm hopeful that Corey will be able to see what you're doing and will be able to appreciate the fact that not every father creates that opportunity. And as a father to my sons, I'm going to keep that story in my mind as well and continue to think about ways that I can pave the way for them. If it's not in the same path as me, how my path can be merged with theirs in a way that meets them where they are. And it sounds to me that you're also doing a fantastic job. While maybe your son can't follow in your footsteps within your day job, so to speak, you have really created an opportunity for him to see you as a role model in everything else you're doing. And I really want to talk about that. I want to give our friends and family the opportunity to know the full picture of you and what everything Charlie is doing. And you've talked with me a little bit about Catholics for Housing and everything you're doing to give back in the DC metro area. And then now this venture that you're working on today with Clear Sky Sports Angels, easy for me to say. Can you tell us a little bit more about your plan for giving back, what you've been doing with Catholics for Housing and now Clear Sky Sports Angels as well?
Yeah, let me start with Clear Sky Sports Angels because out of both the charities, this is really mine. This is my passion. And so and actually it's funny because it's about the book as well. It all stems for the fact that first and foremost, I'm a coach. I give back, man. I want to teach people. And so what I've been doing is I've been coaching basketball, high school level for 10 years. I coached my kids since they were 6. So I've been coaching total 24 years, basketball, travel soccer, 10 years high school. And now I've been coaching AAU basketball for the past 10 years, even though my kids are older and they're gone. And so one of the groups of kids that I love coaching the most are the U17 kids. They're the kids that are going from junior to senior year. Some are senior graduates that haven't gotten any college looks yet. And I coach college showcase teams and we travel. But one of the things that I always tell people is that as coaches for this age group, and remember, this age group is they need help, right? They're very opinionated. They're very moldable. Even though they're 17, 18 years old, they still need to be molded, because one of the things I tell people is that the first thing that we're doing as coaches, especially at this age group, is we are teaching these kids to be men.
Yeah.
Number one.
100%.
Number one.
And they're
We're
so
teaching them.
impressionable, not only at that age, but in that venue, in that forum that you have the time to interact with them. And I know when I was doing coaching, one of the things I could always pick out in every team was which of the boys didn't have a father at home. It was so obvious.
You got it. And so here's the good thing, but here's the bad thing. The good thing is these kids, especially the ones without a father, they need role models. They need role models. And you never know when a role model might come into their life, because they need that role model. But that's a bad thing too. And the bad thing is as we get older and the generations change and the kids change, I really worry that the kids say, why do I need to listen to this old guy? This old guy doesn't know anything, right? I'm not paying attention to them. And so one of the things that I do to combat that is, remember, trust is a two-way street. So if you're coaching anything and you're doing anything, you need to sell to the kids for them to trust you. And then you need to trust them. And the most important relationship you have is that trust relationship, because once you have a two-way trust relationship, you've broken the seal. You're in. And you have no idea what they might need, but at least you're there, and at least you're a role model for them, not only for this particular season, but more importantly, after the season, when they go to college, if they drop out of college, you need to make that communication channel always a two-way channel that they can reach out to you whenever they're in need. And that's how I've always done it. And so Clear Sky Sports Angels was developed because I have always been giving money to AAU basketball, travel soccer, and now we've just sponsored a BMX bike team for a certain amount of money. And so we're giving disadvantaged youths money. And so what I plan on doing for Corey is hopefully he'll run that charity once the foundation has been created and I've got enough money in there.
That's fantastic. And it's something that I've seen as well. Spoiler alert here for the Dadages friends and family, I'm working on, and it's the hardest episode of Dadages I've ever written because it's so personal, but it's the story of my boys' journey, both of my boys, through sports from a very young age, through developmental years, through high school, and now my older son, who is just recently in the last 2 weeks withdrawn from the athletic environment at a college level. And it's been a long and winding road and a difficult journey. But one of the things that I really saw during those developmental years was what I call the anthropology and the sociology of sports. In particular, football was our family sport. As a quarterback dad, I had a responsibility to a lot of members of the team who weren't as established and weren't as privileged, particularly from a financial perspective. And there's a stereotype that exists, but it's a reality. It's not just a stereotype that quarterbacks come from more affluent families because it takes a lot more money and a lot of development investment to get them where they're going. But we have to bring the other players along with us. And the simplest way to put it is every time you go to private training, quarterbacks pay, receivers are free. It sounds like a very simple thing, but it's a reflection of this whole sociology that exists around competitive sports and the responsibility of coaches and dads to bring other kids along with them as they're helping their own children rise to the next level.
Case in point, that is such a beautiful and brilliant story. That's exactly where basketball is headed today. And so basketball used to be an inner city game. The kids who had fatherless families, they can work their way out of the inner city because they would play basketball on the blacktop all the time. They can get into college, they can get a college degree, and they can hopefully make it on their own. But let me tell you something, that's gone.
Completely gone. If you can't get to the IMG Academy or not.
That's right. That's right. Because basketball now is what I call a rich kid suburb sport where families can hire trainers and pay them to train their son, and they can get really, really good coaching in the suburbs. And I can't tell you how much I'm saddened to that. It's really, really sad and people don't realize the cultural influences it has, because what's going to end up happening is, let's say Washington, D.C., the inner cities of Washington, D.C., let's say maybe 10 kids escaped because of that basketball ability to play on blacktops. Those 10 kids now, that are growing up in Washington, D.C., they're not escaping. And so I see that, and that absolutely, I'm so disheartened by that.
And then they're
So
not going to
that's,
return and give back. You kill the whole cycle of
you kill it.
reinvestment in the community.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Because that's happening in Richmond. It's happening in DC. All these professional athletes are coming back. They're giving back to the communities they grew up in. Yeah, it's a challenge. That's one of the reasons behind Clear Sky Sports Angels. And, we're going to start it at one county at a time. We're going to branch out. And that's how we're going to hopefully implement this thing. We'll see. Stay tuned.
Yeah, well, and we will stay tuned, Charlie. I know it's a whole other discussion, and I'm not saying that as if it could be a whole other discussion. I'm saying it should be, and let's make it a whole other discussion, because when I get to the point of releasing this episode about youth sports, and as you're continuing to develop Clear Sky Sports Angels, I would love to reconnect with you and stay apprised of what you're doing and see what we can do as the Dadage's friends and family to be supportive of the great work that you're doing. And speaking of great work, this has been great. You've been very generous with your time. I've loved the range of topics we've talked about. This is the classic Dadage's interview, if I've ever seen one, to start from a discussion of real estate and business and investment and credit and end up talking about investing in community and investing in family and the next generation. That's what we're here for, and that's what we're all about. So I couldn't have been more pleased with having shared the last 1 hour and 40 minutes with you. This has flown by, and I've really enjoyed the time. And one of the things that we can't get out of here without doing is, one of the other legacies, we've talked about legacy here. One of the other legacies we try to carry on is the legacy of the bad dad joke, and giving every one of our guests the opportunity to showcase their very worst. So, Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share your very worst dad joke for the friends and family.
Can I share 3?
Sure, absolutely. Let's make it a
And
trifecta.
I have to give a shout out.
Okay.
These 3 came from a Duke University basketball recruit.
Wow. There you
Okay.
go. Okay.
What do you call a cow with no legs?
I don't know. What do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef.
Ground beef. There you go.
And then what do you call a cow with 3 legs?
I don't know.
Lean beef.
I hesitate to ask what the third joke is.
It's coming. You've watched Forrest Gump, right?
I have.
Okay. Well, what generation is Forrest Gump from?
I don't know.
Gen A?
Oh, my.
Gen A.
Gen
There
A. Gen A. Well, I see your 3, and I'll raise you 1.
Okay.
Because I found a dad joke that was so on point with today's topic, and
Uh-oh.
it's so bad that I couldn't resist sharing it.
Let's go.
So, Charlie, I've heard a lot of people make money flipping houses. I tried yesterday, but mine is far too heavy.
That's good.
Yeah. Like I said, on point. You can take that one and use it in your next seminar or
I am.
or work on your next book.
Can I quote you? I'm going to quote you. I'm not
Absolutely.
kidding.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, Charlie, like I said, this has been a great time. I've really enjoyed it. You've shared a lot of really valuable information and wisdom for the friends and family. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a great time.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise. And to the Dadage's friends and family, I'll remind them, until next time, remember, Dad may not always know what he's talking about, but he sure can sound like he does.